The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
Is anybody unhappy with Elon? If you are, well, throw them out of here.
President Trump holds his first cabinet meeting, and all eyes were on the presidential advisor, who may be more famous than he is. What others in the administration and in the party are saying about DOGE's latest initiatives. Then the growing measles outbreak turning deadly. What the new health secretary says about this year's numbers compared to recent trends. And later, your Easter egg hunt could be pricey this year, when the administration is expecting egg costs to finally start to come back down. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. Tonight, President Trump back at the Resolute desk, signing more executive orders, this time instructing federal agencies to cooperate with the Department of Government Efficiency, just hours after the administration announced there'd be mass federal layoffs in the battle to rein in government spending.
One of the most important initiatives is DOGE, and we have cut billions and billions and billions of dollars. We're looking to get it maybe to $1 trillion. If we can do that, we're going to start getting to be at a point where we can think in terms of balancing budgets, believe it or not, something you haven't heard in many, many years.
It comes as the president held his first cabinet meeting just today. In the room with heads of departments and agencies was Elon Musk, whose aggressive moves to cut federal jobs and spending is starting to raise concerns, even among some Republicans who were once all in on the cost-cutting DOGE department. The National News Desk's Atra Al-Nashar reports from Capitol Hill.
It's a classic image illustrating the authority of the executive branch. A president gathered with their cabinet in the White House's cabinet room.
DOGE is very important.
In his latest break with tradition, President Trump's meeting Wednesday involved the unappointed, unvetted, and non-Senate confirmed billionaire Elon Musk.
Getting a lot of praise, I'll tell you, but he's also getting hit.
Some of the criticism is coming from within the Republican Party.
There are rash decisions being made, and it needs to kind of slow down a little bit and involve the people who are actually appointed to head these agencies.
We saw this play out when some federal employees were told they did not have to respond to an email initiated by Musk telling them to either explain what they did the prior week or lose their job.
I think anybody who's not in that agency should be an advisor to a manager who has now been appointed and Senate confirmed.
The president sending a clear message to any cabinet member thinking about pushing back.
Is anybody unhappy with Elon? If you are, well, throw them out of here.
Losers. Believe it.
Okay. You don't believe it. You can read it. You are in denial.
Throughout the country, Republican members of Congress are being confronted by voters angry about Musk and the president's effort to slash federal jobs and programs.
But that's just the reality of it. And I feel bad.
Back in the cabinet room,
we do need to move quickly if we're to achieve a $1 trillion deficit reduction in financial year 2026.
Before the meeting kicked off in earnest, the president spending about 15 minutes focusing on Musk's DOGE efforts before taking questions on tariffs, Russia's war in Ukraine, and immigration. And more mass layoffs likely coming. We're learning federal agencies have been told to start preparing for these job cuts. According to a memo from the Offices of Management and Budget and Personnel Management, agency heads are instructed to prepare for large-scale reductions in force and come up with reorganization plans by March 13th.
So many new developments on this front. Atra, what do we know about these layoffs that have been pitched today?
Well, based on Musk's comments earlier today and what's in that memo, the net is pretty wide as far as who could be affected, who could be losing their jobs next. The goal here is to identify and potentially eliminate jobs that are not specifically mandated by law or considered critical in like the event of a government shutdown, as we often talk about, those critical government jobs. Agency heads are also told to look for ways to replace human tasks with technological tools like AI, for instance. The memo also instructs agency heads to reduce headcount through attrition and allow temp positions to just expire without renewal. And I'm just scratching the surface of what this pages-long memo calls for. But as we've seen in the last 5 weeks of this nascent administration, there's certainly expected to be legal challenges coming from those who just suddenly lose their jobs.
Yeah, big changes ahead. All right, Atra El-Nashar reporting for us from Washington, D.C. Thank you. And tonight, another near miss between planes being reported, this time at Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C. This happening less than 2 hours before yesterday's near miss at Chicago Midway. The Federal Aviation Administration says an American Airlines flight from Boston aborted its landing to DCA to avoid another plane taking off on the exact same runway. The airline says the flight landed, quote, safely and normally. But the FAA, it says these kinds of incursions, runway incursions, are in fact not unusual. And the New York Times says incursions are up 25% from where we were 10 years ago. Data available shows over the past 6 years, about 1,750 incursions have happened each year, with the exception of 2020, which had a low because of the pandemic. That is almost 5 a day across the entire country. President Trump says Ukrainian President Zelensky will visit the White House on Friday to sign a critical minerals deal between the two countries. Zelensky says the deal's framework is ready, but needs more details about security guarantees that Kyiv considers essential. Trump addressed the topic today.
Well, I'm not going to make security guarantees beyond very much. We're going to have Europe do that because it's in, we're talking about Europe as their next door neighbor.
Trump also said he hopes to meet with Russian President Putin soon to work on an agreement to end the war in Ukraine. The Supreme Court justices hearing an argument on whether or not straight white individuals can be discriminated against at the workplace. Marlene Ames claims she was demoted in 2019 by her manager, who's a homosexual male, in favor of 2 gay men when she applied for a promotion. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled against Ames, saying she did not prove the background circumstances of discrimination against the majority. The justices will rule on whether or not those background circumstances are too limited to include the majority class. The measles outbreak in Texas continues to grow tonight. HHS Secretary Robert K. Kennedy Jr. says there are 2 known deaths and more than 124 infections. He says they are monitoring the cases, but so far this outbreak is not out of the ordinary.
There have been 4 measles outbreaks this year. In this country last year, there were 16. So it's not unusual. You have measles outbreaks every year.
8 states have had at least 1 infection this year. Last year, 33 states had at least 1. Also last year saw the 4th most measles infections in the United States since 2000. In 2019, more than 1,200 people got measles, the worst of any year since the early 1990s, and those numbers all according to the CDC. New York City Mayor Eric Adams asking a federal judge to toss out the corruption case against him. He's claiming prosecutorial misconduct after a letter to the Attorney General leaked. The Justice Department has sought to dismiss the charges since the change in administration. Adams was indicted on charges of accepting more than $100,000 in illegal campaign contributions. He denies any wrongdoing. Adnan Syed remains a convicted murderer and out of prison, with his future in limbo after a judge heard testimony without ruling from the bench on his request to have his sentence reduced to time served. Syed served more than 2 decades in prison for the 1999 murder of his ex-girlfriend Heyman Lee. He was freed in 2022 after a judge overturned his conviction. But then Maryland's Supreme Court reinstated the conviction. The question now is whether he'll be forced to return to prison. The case drew global attention in 2014 on the true crime podcast Serial. And California Governor Gavin Newsom is ordering the state parole board to determine if the Menendez brothers would pose a risk to the public if they were freed from prison. That's according to attorneys for Lyle and Eric Menendez, now serving life sentences for killing their parents in 1989. The brothers have been pursuing potential paths to freedom since their attorneys said there was new evidence of sexual abuse by their father. Chase Bank tonight cracking down on Zelle payments to social media contacts in an effort to stop scammers. Updating its user policy, the company says by March 23rd, it may block transfers you make to people with whom you are not familiar. This, as Chase says, nearly half of scams reported by their customers originated on social media, and Americans continue losing billions of dollars as they shop online. Chase is urging you to stay away from payment methods that don't have purchase protection.
My recommendation is to opt for a payment method that absolutely has payment protection, like a credit card. This is when we're shopping on social media and we're not sure. Go off the social media website and search on a search engine for the name of the product or the vendor and the word fraud and the word scam, and just see what pops up.
Often slowing it down, doing your research, experts say, is enough to weed out that fraudulent activity. Actress Michelle Trachtenberg has died at the age of 39. Trachtenberg was best known for her roles in Harriet the Spy, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Gossip Girl. NYPD officers say they responded to a 911 call shortly after 8 a.m. and found a woman unconscious and unresponsive in a Manhattan apartment. Sources tell ABC News she recently underwent a liver transplant. No foul play is suspected. Coming up, how long we'll have to wait before we start to see egg prices come down from their record levels. Then the number of Americans identifying as Christian was on the decline, but that could soon be changing, what the latest numbers tell us. And later, the new progress being made on revitalizing hurricane-ravaged western North Carolina. We'll be right back. Speaker Mike Johnson earned a big win last night getting his budget bill through the House, but now the hard part begins. The House bill satisfied their fiscal hawks, but the possible Medicaid and other entitlement cuts face steep opposition in the Senate. Even so, Speaker Johnson is calling on the Senate to adopt the House bill.
My admonition is to the Senate is to keep it as close as possible to the House version. We demonstrated last night how delicate the balance here is, and if you change too many of the terms, it's going to be very difficult to pass on the House side.
I'm not going to vote for Medicaid cuts. Anything that slashes into benefits for people who are working, I'm not going to be for it.
The Senate passed their own budget bill last week, and now the two chambers of Congress will need to come together to agree on a bill that can pass each side before heading to the president's desk. But President Trump has responded, saying today that he will not touch entitlements.
I mean, I have said it so many times, you shouldn't be asking me that question, okay? This will not be read my lips. It won't be read my lips anymore. We're not going to touch it. Now, we are going to look for fraud. I'm sure you're okay with that.
There are several new layers tonight to the United States crackdown on illegal immigration. Among them, President Donald Trump says he will begin enforcing a type of registry for undocumented immigrants. Here's national correspondent Christine Frizzell with the details.
The order applies to all people in the United States illegally, requiring anyone 14 years and older who's in the country 30 days or longer to give fingerprints and provide an address. Those who don't face a $5,000 fine or jail time.
These folks that are here in this country illegally can self-register. They can avoid the criminal charges, they can avoid the fines, and we will help them go home.
The move stems from a 1940 law called the Alien Registration Act and is part of a broader approach critics say will turn civil offenses into criminal ones and is terrorizing communities.
Donald Trump's obsession with using every lever of government to target immigrants has undermined our national security and our safety.
Still, the crackdown on illegal immigration appears to be having the desired impact, at least along the southern border, where the number of apprehensions has plummeted, including this past Saturday, with just 200, the lowest number in a single day in more than 15 years. But that's not stopping Immigration and Customs Enforcement from stepping up actions inside the country. This video from Colony Ridge, Texas, near Houston, shows people being stopped, fear spreading throughout the largely Latino community, where some worry their family members will be next.
Uno tiene el temor de ir a Honduras.
There's a lot of criminal activity, she says. If someone is deported from here, you're going back to certain death. Immigration and Customs Enforcement posting it made 118 arrests in Colony Ridge, including those charged with criminal sexual conduct, homicide, theft, and other offenses. The largest enforcement action there, with more expected in the weeks to come. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting.
As egg prices soar, Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins is outlining a 5-step plan she says will lower prices, but admitted prices would not come down until at least summer. The cost for a carton of eggs has skyrocketed in recent weeks as flocks get decimated by a widespread bird flu illness. Prices on a carton of eggs has nearly doubled over the last 6 weeks, now north of $8. Rollins today revealing her timeline of when prices would retreat. And today, Secretary Rollins is saying the USDA will invest $1 billion in the new plan that includes enhancing biosecurity measures to help keep the virus off farms, researching an avian flu vaccination, cutting back on regulations on egg producers, and possibly importing more eggs. Rollins spoke with our Jan Jeffcoat earlier today about bringing eggs in from other countries and how to ensure food safety.
As we are looking to import these eggs, whether it's Turkey or anywhere else, they will have to pass an extremely stringent test. And the eggs do get imported, but there is no doubt in my mind that if they come into our country, they will be 100% safe.
Pharmaceutical giant Eli Lilly plans to build 4 new manufacturing plants in the United States. The CEO said the $27 billion investment will help strengthen the supply chain. He also said President Trump's policies influenced the plans. Trump said last week he may impose new import tariffs on pharmaceuticals. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick praised Eli Lilly's decision.
Eli Lilly is doing exactly what the president was hoping would happen, which is having tens of billions of dollars of investment in America. It's going to produce more than 10,000 jobs in America.
Tonight, just days before the first phase of a fragile ceasefire set to end, a handover deal completed as Hamas returns the bodies of 4 hostages pictured here to Israel in exchange for hundreds of Palestinians imprisoned or detained in Israeli jails. The handover will complete both sides' obligation under the ceasefire's first phase, which required Hamas to turn over 33 hostages, 25 of them living, in exchange for nearly 2,000 Palestinians. But now attention shifting to a second phase where a more sustainable peace deal is meant to be ironed out. Under the terms of the ceasefire, the truce continues as long as negotiations are taking place. However, it's unclear whether those discussions have formally begun, and phase 1 is expected to end on Saturday. A steady drop in the number of Christian Americans in the last 2 decades could be leveling off. In a new study, 63% of U.S. adults identified as Christian in 2024, down sharply since 2007. But since 2019, the number has stayed about the same. A rapid increase of religiously unaffiliated Americans has also plateaued. It rose from 16% in 2007 to 28% in 2024, but it's stayed around that level since 2020. And taking a look at your health, a warning today about some serious complications from this year's flu virus. Medical reporter Liz Bonis sharing what's bringing people into the emergency room.
Hey there, everybody. We are in what's called a high severity flu season, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. That means the virus leading to some complications healthcare providers say they have not seen in years. One of those is now bringing children into the emergency room, often with seizures. Dr. Felicia Skaggs-Huang of Ohio Cincinnati Children's Hospital told me.
This year we've been seeing a rare complication called acute necrotizing encephalitis.
Acute necrotizing encephalitis, or ANE, is a severe brain inflammation which can lead to permanent damage. As to why?
We do know that the flu can activate your immune system, and sometimes that seems to focus on the brain.
The lungs are being impacted by another complication this flu season. It can lead to a co- or dual infection in adults, according to Dr. Stephen Blatt of Ohio's TriHealth.
So your entire lungs can get inflamed or irritated, and you can see what we call infiltrates or changes on chest x-rays or CT scans that show inflamed lungs, and sometimes even the lymph nodes get swollen. Sometimes patients will get a bacterial pneumonia on top of their virus, on top of their influenza virus, and that can be really severe, and that will frequently land older people in the hospital.
Finally, this year's flu appears to be leaving people with a pretty severe lingering cough, according to family medicine specialist Dr. Scott Woods.
People are contagious with the flu or most any other virus for about 5 days, but the symptoms will last significantly longer, particularly if you have a lot of bronchitis type symptoms, a hard barky cough. That bronchitis cough can last anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, very commonly.
Now, flu season can last through March, so those especially at high risk for these complications may want to still consider the flu vaccine. With your health news, I'm Liz Bonis reporting.
Okay, Liz, thank you. Coming up, how a teen working at an Ohio restaurant saved the life of a former firefighter. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America, and we begin in Florida with a concerning rise in black bears.
The last time there was a statewide bear hunt was in 2015. It was supposed to last for a week, but the FWC shut it down after just 2 days. The FWC says it closely monitored the hunt, and when the statewide objective of 320 bears was reached, the hunt was stopped.
I would like to see a proposal from staff for a bear hunt.
A hunt is being considered again because the statewide population of the black bear has continued to grow since the early 2000s. According to Florida Fish and Wildlife, there are more than 4,000 black bears. In our region, that number is roughly 120, but in other parts of the state, that population is rising.
They came back here with the Army Corps, with FEMA.
Alan Kirshen singing the Corps' praises. A crew of about a dozen workers, he says, showed up.
We were 5th on the list, they said. Some trees fell on our barn, some trees fell on our RV port.
Were you happy?
Oh, absolutely.
Kirshen lives in Fairview and signed up for the program in December. The Corps is on day 25, doing private cleanup in Buncombe. Brad Morgan's commander over the program.
Say there was a cabin on top of the hill and they'd applied for private property debris removal. We would come in and remove all of these hazardous trees.
287 residents have been serviced. 868 owners are in the queue.
A tearful hug of thanks from a man lucky to be alive, and lucky this young man was on duty last Sunday at the Skyline Chili in Reading.
He needs an S on his back for Superman.
We caught up with 65-year-old Phil Hogan 2 days after 17-year-old Brandon Barker gave him the hug of life, the Heimlich maneuver.
I sat down and got my normal four-way, and I was sitting here and started eating, and then next thing you know, my airway was blocked.
I got behind him, wrapped my arms around him, and put my hands where they needed to and just squeezed as hard as I could.
And then out came some food,
yeah,
and he was breathing again.
Yeah.
What went through your mind then?
Thank God he's safe.
An incredible story there. Coming up, the new hockey record Alex Ovechkin just set and the one he's going for next. The grade 8 Alex Ovechkin is rewriting goal-scoring history in the NHL as he tracks down one of sport's thought to be unbreakable records. Last night, Ovechkin set a new all-time high of 30 goals in a season for the 19th time in his 20 seasons playing. He already held the record of 18. The goal, his 883rd of his NHL career, putting him just 11 behind the great one, Wayne Gretzky, for the all-time goal mark of 894. The Capitals have 24 games left in the season to see if OV can light up the lamp 12 more times. And that does it for this edition of the National News Desk. We invite you to join us again this evening for more coverage on America's top stories. We'll see you then.